Welcome, class, to the Intro to Java Programming. Today's lesson on arrays is the first in a series to introduce 4 of the more popular collection data types. Let's begin with a Coach Joe challenge question. Let's say you need to hold the temperature of 3 items. The temperature can be a whole number. How would you declare a variable to hold these 3 values? Interesting. This answer will work. Now, what if I need to hold 20 temperatures? Should I create a myTemp1 to myTemp20? That would be a fair amount of work to write all those lines of code. What if I need 1,000? One option that allows you to write one variable to meet the needs of 3, 20, 1,000, or more values is the array. The array is an object that allows you to hold a collection of many elements that are the same data type. How can one variable hold many values? We have done this in a prior lesson. In lesson 4, we created one variable which was the payroll object that held 3 values: the hours worked, hourly rate, and tax properties. One object can hold many values. The array is an object that will hold a collection of values. A collection is a single object that represents a group of objects. A collection helps perform tasks like searching, sorting, inserting, manipulating, and deleting. Let me give you a visual example that might help explain how an array works. Here is an empty egg carton. There are 6 spaces available. The egg carton represents a single array variable that holds a collection of eggs. Each open space represents one element. The egg carton now holds 1 egg. Here, the egg carton holds 2 eggs. Remember, the egg carton is one variable object that can hold many separate elements. And now the egg carton holds the maximum of 6 eggs. We will go over more examples in code a little bit later. First, let's cover a few rules and guidelines to remember. An array is a fixed size, meaning you declare the exact number of elements. Once declared, you cannot change the size without recreating the whole array object. All elements of an array hold a single value that must be the same data type, like all ints, all strings, and even all custom objects like the myBank object from lesson 4. With an array, you can control the order of each element. Duplicate values are allowed in the elements. If the data type permits, no values are allowed, and the array offers a sort command. Since all the elements we need to hold are the same data type, one array variable can hold all the temperatures as elements. Here is the syntax for declaring an array. The array variable myTemps is declared as an array of ints with 6 elements. The term index is used to identify the position of an element in an array. Index positions are 0-based. The first element is index 0, the second element is index 1, and this pattern repeats all the way to the end. Correct. Creating several myTemp variables with the number at the end is a clue to use a collection, which an array is one possibility. This is a good Coach Joe tip. If numbers are added to the end of the variable name to make them unique, this is a good candidate for a collection. I would like to point out that the use of an array is very handy in specific situations. You should be aware of the array variable, even though in most cases there is a better collection option. Let's go to our basics project in IntelliJ. Let's close any open tabs. Let's create a new test package. We'll call this collections. Let's create a new class. We'll call this array test. Let's make a little space. Copy in our first test. Import these classes. There are a couple of ways to create an array variable. In this first test, we'll create an empty array variable. No values are assigned, so the default value for each element is null. The variable is declared to hold string values. There are 5 elements allowed in this array. We can test the length with the .length method and verify there are only 5 elements. Let's run this test. And it passed. In the next test, we will create an empty array and populate each element in the next lines of code. Elements do not need to be populated in order. Notice the use of the square bracket after the variable name with an index position. This is how you specifically get or set a value in the array. Let's run this test. And it passes. Let's uncomment this line of code. This line is trying to place a value in index number 5. Notice there is no compiler error. If we run this test, we get an index out of bound error. Remember, we declared the length as 5, which means we get to use indexes 0 to 4. Index 5 is beyond that range. Let's comment this line. Same thing is true if we go with index -1. If we run this test, we will also get an index out of bounds error. Let's uncomment this, or let's comment this line, run it again. Everything passes. Resizing the array is not possible. One of the rules to remember about arrays are they have a fixed size. The array object must be recreated to change the size. Here's a test that holds string elements. Notice the compiler error. One of the elements is a number. Let's comment this line out. Here's how you get the value of a specific element. Notice the square brackets with an index position after the variable name. If we run this test, it will pass. Here is another way to create an array variable while populating the values. The length of this array is 4 because 4 values are used to populate the variable. Also notice you can place the square bracket after the data type or after the variable name. It is preferred to place the square brackets after the data type. Here's a test that creates an array variable and populates it with 5 values. On this line, we change the value of an element. And let's run this test. And it passes. Here is a test that proves we can set the value of an element to null. Because the data type used by the variable declaration allows nulls, the value of the element can be null. And let's run this test. It passes. This test will prove duplicate elements are allowed. Here we have the same value in 2 different elements. Let's run this test. And it passes. This last test will show how to sort an array. Array.sort will sort the array object found inside the parentheses. Let's run this test. Notice it passes. Let's run this test in debug mode. Let's set a breakpoint on the sort command. Let's run it in debug mode. Notice the variable arrays under test. The values are in the order as they were created. Let's step over this line. Notice how the values have been sorted. Let's stop this test. Clear the breakpoint. Run it again. This test passes. Here's a summary of all the test code we wrote in this lesson. You should now have an understanding of the array collection, including the rules and guidelines. Several tests were written to show syntax and features, along with examples that illustrate many of the rules and guidelines. Finally, you should be aware that arrays are one of several collection options, and in many cases there is likely a better collection choice. Your optional homework assignment is to create a test with an array of ints, populate the values, and then sort the array. Write another test to do the same thing with strings. In our next lesson, we will cover the array list collection. Remember, future senior developers, make it work, prove it works, then make it better.
Ready, break!